Welcome back to Nostalgia Academy. Now, if you've spent any time on this channel, you know that I have a deep-seated, borderline obsessive love for the 1980s college rock scene. And I'm talking about the shimmering jangle pop sound of REM, Guadalcanal Diary, the whole lot. That's the kind of music that I felt was both urgent and daydreamy. And usually we're looking backwards, but today we're looking at a band that proves that that specific DNA didn't die out in the late 80s or early 90s. We're talking about the band Alvvays. Now, they aren't from the South. Far from it. They're from the Maritimes of Canada. But the first time I heard Molly Rankin's voice cutting through a haze of distorted guitars, it hit me with the same emotional weight as many of those early REM or Let's Active records. They managed to take the jangly blueprint and modernize it with a fidelity and a lyrical wit that feels kind of like their own thing. And to understand why Alvvays matters to me, you kind of have to look at their origin. Molly Rankin and Carrie McClellan grew up playing fiddle music in Nova Scotia. Now, that might seem like a world away from indie rock, but it gave them a foundation in melody and structure that's rock solid. So when they formed the band in Charlottetown, Prince Edward, Canada, I had to look that up, around 2011, they tapped into a specific kind of melancholy. As a guy who appreciates a tight arrangement and a clear sonic vision, I respect that they don't waste their time. They've only got 3 albums so far, but there really isn't much filler on any of them, if any. So let's break down the evolution of their sound, starting with the record that put them on the map. Their self-titled debut in 2014 was a revelation. If you're a fan of that mid-80s jangle sound, this record, it hits the sweet spot. They recorded this with Chad Van Galen, I think that's how you pronounce it, and you can hear that analog warmth throughout. It's got a lo-fi charm that doesn't feel cheap, it feels intentional. And we have to talk about the song Archie, Marry Me. It's the centerpiece. On the surface, it's a breezy pop song, but it's actually a sharp critique of society and how they view marriage. And it's the way my wife kind of views it. Like, it's just you just sign something. But it's delivered with a shrug of a vocal performance from Molly. It kind of has a C86 era British indie feel. Think the Shop Assistants or Close Lobsters mixed with a very North American power pop sensibility. It's pretty good. The rest of the album follows suit with a clean, chimey guitars that sound like they walked right out of a early REM session. You know, tracks like Adult Diversion and Next to Kin, they have that driving energy that masks a deeper suburban anxiety. But the album established their hermit credentials early on, which I dig. Molly sings about being stuck in her head while the world moves on, which, let's be honest, it's a vibe that most of us can relate to on some level. None of us got into alternative rock because it was the popular thing to do, right? A lot of the hit music at the time just didn't speak to us. It's an album it's about the mundane reality of modern commitment, and it could only be written by a millennial. So, that only makes sense there. But it's wrapped in melodies so bright that it feels like, the sunshine in late June. And when we move on to 2017's Antisocialites, the band evolved from just being catchy to being really atmospheric. You can tell they'd been listening to a lot more like Cocteau Twins maybe, and some Jesus and Mary Chain. The production got more expensive feeling, the reverb grew deeper, and the synthesizers started taking up more space in the mix. And this is where I really started hearing those shoegaze influence creeping in, but they didn't lose the hook. They just took the sound in, basically. I spent a lot of time studying and trying to learn more about music production, and I'm really impressed by their production choices. They used the synthesizers not as an 80s gimmick like Paramore kind of did, but as a way to thicken the air around the guitars. A side note, I absolutely loved when Paramore did that on After Laughter. That was a really good album, and you can fight me on that, but I knew that was more tongue-in-cheek. But Antisocialites feels like a long, lonely drive at 2 a.m. It really does. In Undertow is the perfect opener, starting with those swirling, distorted chords that just kind of hang in the air. And then you have Dreams Tonight, which is pure 60s girl group nostalgia, filtered through, a hazy 80s type lens. Alec O'Hanley's guitar work here it's a masterclass in less is more. He's not shredding, he's painting. He's using those clean chorus tones that remind me of Johnny Marr or early Peter Buck. If you know a thing about guitar sounds, you can hear them playing more with modulation, like chorus, and really lush delay trails. It's really is masterclass in using wet effects without wasting or washing out the melody. It's It's nice. And then after a 5-year silence plagued by gear theft, floods, a global pandemic, they gave us Blue Rev in 2022. If the first 2 albums were the foundation, Blue Rev is the cathedral or the castle. It's named after a Canadian alcoholic beverage, which perfectly captures the record's spirit. It's sugary, but with a sharp kick. It's louder and more complex. The guitars are fuzzier, the drums are tighter and punchier. The arrangements have key changes and tempo shifts that you never heard on the other albums. So I like it. It shows some growth. Songs like The Pharmacist and After the Earthquake are still a band that isn't afraid to let the feedback scream, but yet the vocal melodies remain front and center, and that's going to come back in a minute. Belinda Says might be the best song they've ever written, and it's an anthem for delusioned people. It name checks Belinda Carlisle, and it captures that feeling of wanting to start over, which is cool. They recorded this with Sean Everett, and the mix is fascinating. It's dense, with a lot happening in the stereo image, and yet Molly's voice sits right on top like a freaking lighthouse. And they captured a sound that feels like a lost cassette tape, from 1986, but recorded with modern clarity. And the thing about them, and one of the maxims of rock and roll, if you've got a good-looking female lead singer who plays guitar, you lean into that. So what makes Alvvays the ultimate subject for me is that they remind me in many ways of why I fell in love with this kind of music in the first place. And I've been discovering newer bands like that gives me hope. It's about the tug of war between a bright, happy melody and a sad, introspective lyric. It's about the way a budget guitar can sound when it's pushed a little too hard. And, whether you're stuck in traffic, working on your own projects, or just looking out over the water, Alvvays provides the perfect soundtrack for that specific kind of thoughtful solitude. They aren't just wearing the 80s like a costume. They're among the legitimate heirs to the college rock spirit. They've taken the spirit of that era, the independence, the melody, cleverness, and they built something that's going to last just as long, I think, as the records we grew up with. And they're proof that as long as there are people who appreciate good melody, thoughtful production, and a sincere story, this genre, it'll never grow old. There'll always be some out there, people like Alvvays. So now I want to hear from you. Are you a fan of Alvvays? Had you heard of Alvvays? I think I probably should have heard of them a long time ago. I feel like I should have run across them. My favorite is that first record. I think it's top to bottom great, but the other 2 are almost as good. You ever seen them live? I don't think they've ever played around here. I know they played Atlanta, something like that. But do you have a favorite song of theirs? Always interested to know. Leave a comment below. Let me know. And always, like, subscribe. All that stuff does help the channel. And I know every YouTuber will say that, but it really does. And, we're fighting the good fight against the AI. And I've always said, if I was using AI, this would be a lot better than it is. And until the next time, you guys take care, and I'll see you on the next one.